76ers. 10, 9, 8, 76ers.
What's going on, everyone? This is UK 76ers. My name is Ben Glasspool, and the Philadelphia 76ers have lost again by 112 points to 94 to the Atlanta Hawks. Now, a lot of this does attribute to the fact that we have players missing through COVID or injuries or whatever else. And as a result, I'm still not too sure how I feel about this. There's a lot of disappointment, of course. You know, we've lost, and you never like to lose. But there's also a lot of anger, and a lot of this anger, 99.9% of this anger, is not directed towards the Sixers or their players. There's only so much you can do as a franchise in this situation. But it's all directed towards the NBA and Adam Silver. So in the Nuggets game, I think I was a bit more. I enjoyed it more, partly because it was just quite a nice breath of fresh air to have. Like, these youngsters playing really good, playing hard basketball, and you felt, okay, this is just a one-off, so I could allow it. You know, it's still annoying, but I'll allow it. I'll let it slide. But since then, we've had Miami and the Celtics have their game postponed. We've had Dallas have their game postponed against the Pelicans, I believe. So the NBA have started to realize that we can start postponing games. I think my immediate thought was maybe they were just a bit nervy about getting the first one done, but now that they've got the first one done, they'll welcome postponements if and when they feel they think it's necessary. But alas, they have shafted the Sixers yet again, and it seems to be the policy is that we'll let you have postponements if you're the darling of the NBA. So if you're the Boston Celtics and you're Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who of course everyone in the NBA loves, we'll let you have a night off. If you're the Miami Heat, who bring such a lovely culture and everyone in the NBA loves, everyone loves Spo, everyone loves Jimmy Butler, we'll let you have a night off. If you're the Dallas Mavericks and you've got Luka Doncic, the future face of the NBA, yeah, we'll let you have a night off. Oh, but if you're the Sixers, no, not the Sixers. No. You've got enough players. No, you've got enough players. Get Mike Scott to suit up. No, you're fine. You tanked X amount of years ago. We know Adam Silver doesn't like us because of that. And honestly, it's starting to show, and it's just unbelievably pathetic from him. Look, I'm not trying to say, oh, we've lost solely because of this postponement. There are some things I will get into because there are stuff that could have been avoided. Look, you've got to take things like fatigue and the fact that the squad's hugely depleted at the moment into account. But there are some issues which need to be rectified and have reared their ugly head before, even when we had a full strength team. And like I said, I will dive into that. But the NBA just need to hang their heads in shame, to be honest. The Denver thing was bad enough, where we had 7 players, only one of whom was actual starter, and honestly only 2 or 3 were genuinely in our rotation from the bench. And then we've got the Hawks today. So 2 days afterwards, we have to then travel down to Atlanta. Again, our squad's still depleted. There's still a risk that we could be transferring the COVID virus around. No, Adam Silver's not bothered. And then we go back to Philly tomorrow to play Miami, who also have a COVID problem, as well as us. So, that'll just be a breeding ground for it, I bet. But, as long as the NBA are making their money, who's really bothered? And that's the really disappointing thing, because I said it in my last video, is that during the bubble, the NBA did everything perfectly. We've seen how the Premier League have tried to respond to COVID, how NFL, MLB, and you've really felt the NBA led the way in how to respond to COVID, how to get sport back. And at that point, you were really chuffed with them. You almost got a sense of pride in the organization that they were really, like I said, just leading the way. They were taking the impetus, taking a stand, making sure that their players were safe. It felt as if they cared about the players. They don't anymore. The bubble obviously gave them a bit of a hit and a financial hit, and they just don't care anymore. It's just, you're no longer human beings. Joel Embiid has a 3-month-old kid. You just got to play and spin the wheel. Don't care how vulnerable that kid is. Don't care who you might be, meeting with, who may have the virus or not. No, it doesn't matter. You just got to go out and play. And to his credit, he did come out and play, because to be honest, I'm not sure if I was in a situation, I'd be doing the same thing, because at the end of the day, your family's a hell of a lot more important than any old basketball game. But, to his credit, he did his best today. And that sounds like a good sort of platform to go into this game. So first quarter, yeah, we looked pretty solid. We led at the end of the first quarter, 32-28. But the first 6-7 minutes are fine because that starting five, it was Maxey, it was Green, it was Mike Scott, it was Joel Embiid, and it was Dakota Mathias. He's not brilliant, but it's a competitive five, and that's partly because Maxey and Embiid are so good. But from the offset, you could tell Embiid knew he had to carry this team if there was any chance of a win. He was doing all sorts, getting his points everywhere, be that behind the 3-point line, in the post. His moves were exceptional. The way he moves his feet is exceptional. He's drawing fouls. And to the point where he finished the first quarter with 16 points. So he was on course for 64 points if he maintained that trend. But obviously, by the time the third quarter started, it became evident we don't need him. The game's lost. But he was fantastic. And then again towards the tail end, that's when the Atlanta run started kicking in, when we had to make the alterations because it became evident we don't have a squad. We had to play Dwight Howard with Joel Embiid as our front court. We had to play Paul Reed, a two-way rookie, the 58th pick, a two-way rookie at small forward. We had to play Isaiah Joe, a second-round pick at the guard, and it's just we had one ball handler in the squad to the point where Danny Green had to play backup point guard, and Atlanta had a really solid game plan to their credit. They knew we had a small rotation. We knew we had a tired team, and we didn't have a ball handler. So whenever Tyrese Maxey was on the floor, it was a full court press and telling Danny Green, you've got to try and get past us, and he doesn't quite have the handles to do that. They played on the fast break. Whenever the rebound was taken, they sprinted up the court to tire us out because it's pretty easy to tire us out, especially with what's happened recently, and indeed with the fact that we had a small rotation. And if you tired Embiid out, which when you run from one end of the court to the other so quickly, if you tire him out, then that's you're going to do pretty well for yourself if you can make it so he's not as effective. So to their credit, Atlanta, they came in ruthlessly and they did a job and they knew what they were doing, and you can't denounce it. They did fantastically well in how to play against us. So yeah, that was the first quarter. It was just towards the end, the last 4 minutes, you knew where this game was going, and from the end of the first quarter, that last 3-4 minutes, right the way through to the end of the game, it was one-way traffic. It was Atlanta just absolutely having their way with us. So the second quarter started, and of course, Embiid and Maxey are getting a well-deserved rest because, of course, and that's when the cracks really started to show. Without that, there was no other person who could score. Isaiah Joe ended up having a decent game, but a lot of his points were in garbage time. But no, I will get onto him in a sec because he had a really, really good game. Danny Green, Mike Scott, the vets, the people that need to stand up and be counted in these situations, horrible. Danny Green finished on 0 for 9 from the field, 0 for 7 from 3. Mike Scott 0 for 5 from 3. Now, I will give him a bit of a pass, but it was still not good enough. There were a lot of sloppy turnovers in there as well. The defense wasn't quite there. There was one time Danny Green fouled DeAndre Hunter on a 3 to send him to the line for 3 free throws. You got to be cleverer than that. He's a good defender, and he's given away 3 points. And we if we had to win this game, we had to play it perfectly on both ends, and we weren't. But I just felt it was almost embarrassing for them that they were getting shown up by kids. Isaiah Joe, Paul Reed, even Tony Bradley had a pretty solid game, I guess. But it was from them pretty bad. But we're not going to go into them too hard. It was damage limitations from the offset, and Danny Green has been, in my opinion, more good than bad. Look, he's going to have streaks where he's bad, and going to have streaks when he's good. And also, we need to take into account, it's no coincidence that the threes aren't dropping when Ben Simmons isn't playing. We know how good he is at assisting, but we know how good he is at assisting threes. And there's just something about that kid that just makes everyone better from shooting. But no, Danny Green, he just needs to sort it a bit. We'll see how he goes tonight. Maybe he can. That's the beauty of basketball. He can redeem himself immediately this evening against the Heat. That's if that game goes ahead. My God, just looks a bit past it. I don't want to make too many rash decisions on him, because if I can give other people passes for one game, I should, just through consistency, give Mike Scott a pass because he's returning from injury, and I will. But it does raise the question: is that if we can get a trade, he's got a semi-decent contract, 5 mil. If we can get a trade somewhere, do you do it? But that's a conversation for another day because I think you got to just give these lot a bit of a pass on that front. But one thing I won't excuse is some of the defending, and I've mentioned it time and time again. Is this pick and roll defense, and that Trae Young and Clint Capella had their way solely because we can't defend a pick and roll properly, and I don't get it. And it's something that's really annoyed me for years now, that teams like Atlanta, because Trae Young always does extremely well against us, teams like Atlanta can come against the Sixers and use the pick and roll, which is probably one of the most basic offensive weapons you've got, and use it perfectly to get points whenever they want. If we go under, he shoots and they drain the three. If you go over, normally he breezes past. If the center steps up, then he lobs it over to the other center, i.e. Clint Capella, and he knocks it down for an easy 2. If the center doesn't step up, they float it over. And whenever we try and pick and roll, it's never that efficient. It's never that good. And it's got to the point where I'm just like, well, that's partly because we just can't seem to defend it properly. Look, obviously, Trae Young's a proficient young star. He's going to get his. But this shouldn't be this easy. Another side point about Trae Young is the way he tries to pick up fouls where he just stops and then waits for them to run into him is pathetic. I know someone else has called him out with that before in the NBA. It is really just pathetic. You're better than that. But that's a whole different side point. Don't think of him as bitter. I don't really like the guy, but by God, he can ball. He can ball out. So that's a whole different story. But yeah, this pick and roll defense needs sorting ASAP. And on top of this, on the offensive side of things, look, we know a lot of our offense comes through Ben Simmons, and he obviously isn't playing. And Tyrese Maxey was again really good tonight, 18 points. But sometimes we just seem to lack ideas, and I see teams, running the pick and roll really well, and I see teams running plays to get open looks. And then what happens with us is that we run these something that resembles a pick and roll, but it lacks any sort of intensity. There's no Embiid doesn't roll to the rim, which is a big issue because that doesn't create the space, and then teams can end up just going in on the point guard, i.e. Maxey, and then he's just got 2 people on him and he's kind of flustered. But we end up just passing it around the perimeter. It looks really flimsy in terms of what we're trying to do. There's no dribble penetration. No one's trying to get to the rim, and then we just get difficult shots, and then we miss said shots. And that's what annoys me, is that we ended into these ruts. I'm not sure if it's a mentality thing. I'm not sure if it's just because our players were depleted and we're missing some key stars. But we get to these points where we have no offensive scheme. And this wasn't just with Doc, but it was with Brett Brown as well last year. And that's not me saying this is a whole Brett Brown thing, because Doc has got to sort this out. It'll be very easy to say, oh, this is just a Brett Brown thing and that it's his fault and it'll change when it changes. No, this has to go down to Doc as well, because he's a good basketball mind, and this has unfortunately happened a fair few times now, is that we don't seem to get the shots we want when Embiid is double teamed, or he just can't seem to get in on a certain play. We have no ideas. And that's the problem, is that our points only came from Embiid doing his work or passing it out, and even then people weren't hitting their shots. But normally that's how we got our points. So it's Embiid in the post, it's him doubling up, or it's Maxey just charging to the rim and finishing brilliantly. There's no one else seems to be able to get that sort of penetration or that intensity to make the ball move faster, make the defense just uncoordinated. It was so easy just to stay in front of us. And look, I don't want to get too worked up because, again, we don't have our best players, but it's a bit of a worry for me. But we can't gauge if we improve until we have all our best players back, and I'm not sure when that's going to be. So yeah, the second quarter finished and we're down 50-65. We're turning the ball over. They're getting points off the turnovers. Hawks have so much energy. One thing that is quite nice, Maxey had 2 great blocks on Trae Young, which is really cool. But Maxey was just fantastic again, which we shouldn't be too surprised about anymore. He's turning into one of our best players. And I'm not speaking in hyperbole; he genuinely is. He's been fantastic. We start the third quarter hoping that maybe we could just start with a bit of a run, but again, the Hawks started on a 12-2 run, and it became obvious this game was not going to be winnable. So we hooked Embiid 4 minutes in. At the half, he had 24 and 11. I mean, from 23 minutes, that was just incredible, but it shows the effort he was putting in to try and get us over the line, but it just wasn't to be. Third quarter finished with Atlanta going from 32 to 15 in points wise. And then the fourth quarter was garbage time. Isaiah Joe came in and he looked, we saw at the start of the last game, his shot was falling, but he got fatigued and then it didn't. And then people were saying, oh, I don't know about Isaiah Joe. But this is what he does when he's just got a nice amount of minutes to his name. And he's not under too much pressure to, outdo himself. So he had 18 points, 4-7 from three, and it was an efficient 18 points. So more of the same, please. If Isaiah Joe can step up, and he was getting him, off the dribble from the mid range, obviously from 3-point land, and if he can just make that consistent, it comes a point where we don't need Furkan Korkmaz. Like we probably will do for the rest of the season, but going forward in the future, if Isaiah Joe can just keep doing what he's doing, fantastic. Paul Reed obviously played a few minutes. I really like his energy. Look, his perimeter shot is in there from the mid range. He seems okay, but he's a big guy, but he can move quite well. He can move his feet quite well. I think defensively he's got a lot of potential. So we can't expect too much from the guy, but I do like what I see from him. He's quite raw, but he'll get there soon enough, I'm sure. Tony Bradley had a few times. He's really energetic on the boards. And going forward, because Dwight Howard is our second center, of course, but if Tony Bradley can just keep chipping away, keep improving, and then we've got a young backup center to Joel that can be here for a while. So those are just a couple positives. But I think one of the most frustrating things for me, obviously the game finished 112 to 94. One of the most frustrating things for me is that I am now going into basketball games and I'm not looking forward to them. And you might say, oh, it's only been a couple games and you've been spoilt so far. And I wasn't around for the process years. I started supporting the Sixers in 2018. But perhaps I haven't been a bit too spoiled, and perhaps I don't know what how bad it can get because I wasn't able to process years. But I feel the issue I've got is that my excitement derives from the fact that I can see all our best players and I can see our team progress. Of course, I want to see our teams win. But when you get to see that progression, when you get to see all the players, gelling together and establishing an identity, and now it's all going, and now we're playing games where they're not even games. If Atlanta had some fans back, obviously that's how that's okay in Georgia. If you're a fan and you paid money to go see that game, even if you're a Hawks fan, it's like, well, what am I watching? This isn't professional sports. This isn't two professional teams going at it in a competitive environment. This is just, the Sixers are just Joel Embiid with a few dottings of rookies and G Leaguers, and then a couple vets. That just is what excitement can I get from that? And so our record is going, getting worse and worse and worse. We're now 7-4, and it's annoying because it doesn't reflect how good we've actually been. And look, I'm not trying to make excuses. Records don't lie. And at the end of the day, the record doesn't really mean anything. It's about how you do in the playoffs. But all that hard work, all that momentum gained is now completely undone because the NBA has shown their ineptitude and their lack of willing to make the hard decisions to benefit the players to ensure that they are safe. And that's the annoying thing is that okay, great, Adam Silver, great NBA. You've got these games going, but what games have you got? What quality of games is this? And it's got to the point where wouldn't it make more sense instead of seeing this game with the likes of Dakota Mathias getting a lot of minutes, with the likes of Isaiah Joe, the likes of Paul Reed, I like some of those guys, but they shouldn't be playing this amount of minutes. Wouldn't it make more sense if this was postponed so that we can do this later on in the year, so that we obviously have Embiid, we have Ben Simmons, we have Tobias Harris, we have Matisse Thybulle, we have Shake Milton. But also on the Hawks side of things, they were like, yeah, it'll be good to do this when we have Danilo Gallinari and we have Bogdan Bogdanovic. It's not about the Sixers. It's about everyone here. And I think a postponement for this game would have made a fair bit of sense, especially as we got on a back-to-back because the scheduling has completely, done us over. And similarly with the Nuggets game, I mean, need I say more how that game should have been postponed when you look at the personnel available? The policy seems to be for the NBA is that if you've got 8 players, you can play, but they don't care which 8. It could be the dredges of your squad against a fully fit Los Angeles Lakers team, for example. So we could have feasibly, it'll be okay if we start with a team of Paul Reed, Dakota Mathias, Isaiah Joe, Furkan Korkmaz, Tony Bradley, and then Tyrese Maxey or something. That'll be okay to play against the Lakers, just so long as you've got 8 people. And there has to come a point where you've got to look at it from the NBA side. It's like, it's not necessarily just about having 8 players, it's about having players that actually do something for your team. I try not to be harsh, and again, I'm not trying to make excuses, but what sort of basketball are we getting if you're not going to make these postponements? If you're going to let these teams run out, and if you're going to just allow teams to get swept because the players they've got are terrible, and this could happen to anyone. All it takes is one little outbreak at the Lakers, for example, and LeBron James and Anthony Davis are out for 14 days. We're seeing with Boston, Jason Tatum's out for 14 days. This isn't going to happen to anyone. And as much prep as teams have done to their rosters, no one can prepare them for 3 or 4 of their best players to just completely be out for 2 weeks. No one's prepared for that because it's not feasible. So in these situations, you need to make the required changes to ensure that it's a level playing field, to ensure that at the end of the season, the standings reflect how good each team has actually been, not how lucky they've been with COVID, not how unlucky other teams have been with COVID. And that's the real issue I've got with it. But we've got the Heat tonight. They're depleted, we're depleted. Maybe that makes it a bit even. But we want to see a fully fit Miami Heat team against the fully fit 76ers team. And we can if they postponed it and if they moved it back. And that's why they did the scheduling as they've done it. That's why they've done half it now and half it later so they can fit these games in. But it probably won't get postponed. Money talks. And it's very obvious from what's happened in the last few days that where the NBA's allegiances lie. And it's not to these teams, it's not to these players, it's to the people who are lining their pockets with cash. Anyway, it's a somber note to finish on. That's just my opinion. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I'll see you tomorrow evening for the Miami Heat game. Stay safe, guys.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.